Okay, so did you know that on average, people lose up to 22 days a year to overthinking? Can you imagine that much time just to dwelling upon our thoughts? I could definitely relate, but I think quantifying it is scary. But it did make me think about thinking, right? Because we're in an age of AI, which the different AI streams can actually think for us and predict what we are thinking. And yet we are also simultaneously going to be in this rumination phase as humans where we reflect on our thinking and think through worst case scenarios, good scenarios, and just overthink through things as well. Very common habit, but also probably a different spin on it is what I wanted to talk about today. So, hi everyone, I'm Riya Bhatara and welcome back to the Riyally podcast. All right, keeping it real, let's go into thinking models in the world of AI, because what is real and what isn't is a good question to ask. Okay, so what are thinking models? In terms of psychology, obviously, thinking models have been transcribed as ways of thinking, the way we structure our thoughts, the compositions of how we actually work through it. So obviously, my expertise is not in how these thinking models are applied to AI. That's not what today is about. It's about understanding our own thought process in a world where maybe some systems can understand it better for us now, or we are more predictable in terms of getting a summary of our own thoughts through AI. And if you think about it, it comes down to patterns, right? Like the way we talk, the fears that we have, the constant conversations, the phrases that we repeat within ourselves. And that's what AI models like ChatGPT can predict what you're going to say next. And they also bring a lot of information and research into what you're already feeling or what you're already thinking through in terms of solving a problem. And I think it comes down to a lot of information processing that kind of compresses for us to be able to then think through the actual outcome and speed through our thinking in a way. So when we can speed through our thinking, how do we understand where we are in terms of our own self-awareness without being reliant on a data system so that we can guide it better if needed for our own efficiency and or just have a standalone and not need that reliance in life? So there is one thinking model in psychology which says that there's system 1 and there's system 2. System 1 is very fast, it's intuitive, it's those snap decisions that you make. What do you want for lunch? And I want pizza. A quick thing that doesn't require much effort. Whereas system 2 is where you make those slow, deliberate decisions like, am I really going to change my job? Or will moving, say, my superannuation to a different firm, will that actually be better for me in the long term? Things like that, where decisions actually require some data processing, where you need to, in essence, make some effort in making that decision, right? So there are two systems. So this thinking model actually says that system 2, the one that requires effort, full thought process, that one is actually meant to monitor system 1 that makes these fast, snappy decisions. But then system 2 kind of feels like, well, I need my break. So in essence, system 2 is a little more lazier than your system 1. It's not as fast. And what that means is that we don't have that monitoring for accuracy or the monitoring for biases that system 1 may have, because it might be more intuitive to your environment and how you're feeling that day and so on and so forth. So system 2 requires effort. It's not as proactive as system 1. If you think about system 1, system 2 as humans is how we think, which is one of the models, not all the thinking models, but one of the thinking models is like that. What we are getting when we interact with AI such as ChatGPT, we are basically getting system 1, which is fast thinking, but we are getting it with the logical steps and effort of system 2, which is the research that I'd have to do by looking at all these superannuation firms and what that percentage is. So any decision that you make need that logical effort, and that is what is the offering of these AI models and how AI is actually shaping up and being valuable in our life in a way. And it's not that we can't as humans do that. We obviously can, that reasoning and effort, and we do the research that we need to make those decisions. But it's just that sometimes it is easier to get that information in a quicker format. Recently was International Day of Yoga, and something I've always, whenever I've attended yoga class, was the idea that yoga or spirituality asks you at a certain point with those meditations was always, get to a point where you can see yourself from the outside. And I'm still on that journey. I don't think I'm there yet, but I feel like it's very interesting that ancient philosophies have always talked about seeing your experience from another perspective. And I think that what that means is like from outside yourself. Because when we come back to something like a mental model, what it's actually saying is reality is not necessarily what we think reality is. Reality is the interpretation of our reality. So 5 people can be sitting in the same room, having the same conversation, and having completely different interpretations or realities of what is actually happening in that room and how that conversation is going or what is being discussed. And that actually comes down to so many different things that might be due to external constraints, internal constraints, things we've experienced before, things we are fearful of experiencing, or things that we look forward to or are very excited to experience, and so forth. So it is a confirmation bias as well. Just to throw in another lingo, confirmation bias is actually how human brains actually work. So confirmation bias is when you think about something and then evidence for it everywhere. Confirmation bias is also when you're like, I want a red car. And then you're like, red car, I must need a red car. There are many different ways that we can interpret reality. And that confirmation bias as a human actually helps us consolidate that. It would be interesting to understand how confirmation bias plays through in AI in the coming times, because right now it is very receptive to the data that it receives, whereas I feel as and when the data resource of AI gets more stronger, it does require a certain level of critical thinking and also a certain level of ethical thinking with people in power to be able to contain that in meaningful ways. AI is evolving like every week right now, so it's very interesting to learn about it, but also wonder which direction it's actually going to shape up to, because I don't think, as much as everyone knows, I don't think we all know enough, right? Because it renews itself so often. So coming back to the study that we talked about at the start of the episode. So people approximately overthink 88 minutes a day, which is what translates to 22 days in a year. So we need an actual annual vacation to overthink everything that's happening in our lives. I think I might be on the higher end actually of that, whatever that average is. They say 40% of people will overthink about the future, then 22% of people overthink about the past. And that's a lot. And 28% of people think about all three, past, future, and present equally. So they've got the triple whammy. So basically, coming back to where we are as people is that when we are are on overdrive of system 1, because we are thinking through certain things. And what that also means, and this is not a study, but I think my real take on this is that if people are overthinking that long hours on average, that actually means that we must be, as humans and as a society, thinking through the same mental models on a large scale. And what that means is, as a society, we are concerned about the future, and we do spend a lot of time spinning those future scenarios and thinking about, oh, that could have been better yesterday, or that was really annoying, and things like that. So as humans, we do fluctuate between our future and our past. I also think some aspect of that overthinking, I feel like the definition needs to be a lot clearer though. I get it, like with the research, it makes sense and you have a standardized process that makes it reliable. But at the same time, I feel like what could be overthinking for one person might not necessarily be overthinking for another person, right? You might genuinely have to think about life. You might genuinely have to think about your job, or you might genuinely have to think about your workout routine. So everyone has different phases of life they're in where they have to invest more time in a certain area, or they have certain goals within which that they're trying to work, or certain challenges that they're trying to navigate. I think although this research is quite interesting in the way that the numbers are phrased and how that kind of predicts a certain element of our society, I think it definitely have to take it with a grain of salt in terms of where that thought process is for everyone. But I do think it does bring us back to this thinking models, right? I do feel like diversity of thought is going to be so much more important in the coming times. I know there's a lot of conversation about emotional intelligence because that's something AI is still adapting to. But I think emotional intelligence combined with critical thinking, where you can actually pick and choose what information is important for you. So that system 2 thinking, where you can put the effort in and be able to have those data points and actually make decisions and be able to bring that system into fruition. I think that being able to lead the systems, being able to lead processes, and being able to understand the nitty-gritty details of how any information is important and in what context, that is the kind of thinking models that we need to work towards more as a society. I feel I'm in that boat as well, where I'm more into my system 1 thinking, and the decisions I do make, it takes a lot longer, and I do want enough information and research when I make those major life decisions or big decisions. I think it's interesting to want to flip that switch and bring it more to the real world and to our daily habits and how we can actually elevate our potential as humans with our thinking in today's times and be able to maximize the opportunities that might be around us based on those thinking models, and switching them and switching how we think and bringing that to the fray. I think it comes down to just being able to be more prepared for any sort of information, data point that comes, and being able to see it from different perspectives. And maybe we have a deeper conversation about critical thinking and what that actually means in one of our upcoming episodes. I think in the world of AI, it really comes down to one thing: knowing how you think more clearly, having that awareness of what your thought patterns are, but not necessarily just the pattern. It's how that pattern of thought actually operates, and which system does it operate in? Is it your system 1 or is it your system 2? And how does that play into your life? I feel like this is about, in the world of AI, it's more important to know our system 2, know our rationale, which again comes down to thinking deeply. At the crux of it, it's just the fact that we think for ourselves, we can think critically, which is like we can identify and sift through different information. And at the same time, we can think deeply. And I think that's a very savvy mental model to adapt to for today's day and age. If you think this resonates with someone, then please do share this episode with them. Until next time, reflect, reinvent, and rise.